In this video, we are going to learn about attributes and props. Attributes are related to some JSX elements which are there. That can be HTML DOM elements, or it can be components. And in terms of components, there is also a term called props, which we'll get into. But before we go there, I wanted to highlight something about JSX. In JSX, the syntax is somewhat more stricter than normal HTML. So that is what I wanted to say, which means that if so something like this, like normal components can be there, HTML components can be there, user defined components can be there, and apart from that you can have text nodes like this also. You can also, like HTML, you can put these text nodes in some tag also. So let's say some p tag, it's fine. But what you can't do is something like this, that let's say you remove this div, then you see that there is syntax error. In fact, if you try something like this in HTML, it will work. HTML was, as we remember, it was slightly forgiving, in a sense that if some elements or some tags you forgot to close, then automatically it used to close for you, right? But that is not going to happen here. Here you must close each and every tag. Okay, so much so that even those tags which are not generally closing, which are not generally restricted to compulsorily be closed in HTML, they are also required to be closed in HTML. So for example, let's say hello world is there, and let's say another hello there is there. Okay, and now let's change this div to div for now. Okay, now hello world is there and hello there is there. Okay, now you can clearly see that something like this is printed, but between hello world and hello there, let's say I want to have a new line, then we know that for that the HTML element is going to be br. Okay, so if I write br, but here I have to self close it. Okay, if you remember that this thing was not compulsory, this ending self closing was not necessary, only this much was sufficient, right, in HTML. But you can see clearly that it is showing you an error. You must self close it, even those tags which are generally not required to be closed in HTML. And now when you render this and you try to see the elements, then you can see that in plain HTML it is not closed. So that is fine. Like, so React will take care of like eventually how what to render, that is fine. But inside in the eventual DOM, but inside JSX, these restrictions are there, and it is good, right? Because they allow us to write a proper valid syntax without any errors. Okay, so that should be fine. So this was example of some normal tag, like br tag, or some horizontal rule tag was there, right? So these things are fine. However, let's now consider some other non-trivial tags. So something like, let's say img tag, and we also know that img tag is also will be self-closing here, because in HTML it was not compulsorily self-closing, but here it has to be self-closing compulsorily. Then, and especially it does not have any body, but as we can see that it is giving warning because it needs the src thing, right? Now src is going to be so we can see, we can take a placeholder image, something like this, and we can put it here. Okay, and then it is saying that, yeah, so it should have alt attribute also. Okay, so firstly, that is not compulsory, it's just giving a warning. But firstly, with this, let's see this. Let's see the view. So you can clearly see that below hello world there is an image of dimensions 150 by 150, and that is just this URL is gives an image. So even if there is no extension, but as you can see that this URL gives an image. Okay, so that should be fine. Now if you see this in HTML, then you can see that, yeah, this is not self-closing in HTML, that is fine in HTML, right? And more importantly, you can see that this src tag is passed as it is. Okay, that should be also fine. uh, Apart from that, this we passed in single quotes, right? So single quotes, double quotes, everything is fine. So like HTML, so in HTML, we there was not we we wanted to have double quotes only, but this is like plain and simple JavaScript, right? So single quotes, double quotes, everything is fine. Now when again, so again here also the same thing will be rendered, right? That is fine. Even if you are having single quote, that was also translated into double quote. Okay, so that should be fine. uh, but what is this src is equal to what is this? Okay, so obviously in HTML we know that this is called an attribute, right? Here also in JSX also, we know that this is not normal HTML tag. This is a JSX element, but still here also this thing is called an attribute. And like HTML, here also you can pass multiple attributes. So for example, alt is equal to, you can write placeholder, okay, something like this. And this will generally will not be visible, but let's say some URL is not loaded, then you can see that instead of image, the text placeholder comes into picture. Yeah, so that should be fine. Now now we can see that, yeah, so let it be like this. Okay, now let's see that what is, so till now whatever we saw, that is like exactly same as HTML. Now let's see what is not same as HTML. Since this is JavaScript, this is JSX, we get the full power of JavaScript. Okay, which means that rather than passing simply strings, actually we can also pass other data types also, or for that matter any data types, because we can actually pass complete variables. So let's say this path is called URL, right? Then I can create a variable called URL is equal to, this is string, and then I can pass it. And as a result, when I see the result is exactly the same, right? So output is still like this, but internally it is coming from variable. And then why it can be useful? It can be useful because now this thing can be dynamically generated, right? So for example, this plus somehow automatically this number 150 or 250 is generated, and it is concatenated, and this URL is generated dynamically, right? And then this thing is passed. Okay, but then also you can see that this is working, right? So you can see that 150 instead of 150 it is 200. Then automatically this thing is changing. Okay, and now a different image is coming. Okay, so you can understand that we get the full power of JavaScript also here. Apart from that, yeah, so it's not specific to, so yeah, obviously image src has to be some string, but in general this URL, sorry, in general whatever in curly braces you pass, that can be anything, right? So let's say something can accept some non string things also, like boolean or numbers, then those things can also be passed. In fact, in HTML it will not be that much useful, but it will be very much useful in components, as we'll see later, that normal HTML elements, components can also have their attributes like this, like we are passing here. Similarly, we can pass here also, but we'll see that soon. Firstly, let's finish normal HTML elements rather than components. Okay, so yeah, so we can see that we get the power of JavaScript like this. Okay, apart from that, we just saw about img tag. Let's consider something where this thing is not a string. Okay, so in this case it is string, right? Let's consider the example of button element. Okay, so button, and let's say click me. Then we know that here we can pass on click, right? On click attribute, right? However, there is a difference. uh, So one of the differences, like class is class name, similarly one of the different other differences in JSX is the attribute names. If whatever the standard attribute names are there, if they are multi-word sort of, looks like multi-word sort of, then actually it is camel cased, even if that is not strictly camel case in HTML. So for example, we saw that in case of HTML, on click method was something like this: on click is equal to, and it was a string, and there you can have you can have anything, like, so let's say foo, and then like this it was there, right? This is not the case in React. In React, first of all, this thing this thing is generally on click. So generally, like, these names are generally changed based on the intuition that if it is multi-word, then, so that is how it is, right? You have to see that how things are going to be. But in general, like, just based on common sense, you can think that what it should be. But in case you use wrong, then you can just see that if you try to do something like this, then sometimes they will try to give you proper suggestions in console, that, yeah, did you mean this? So it will be one of the hints where you can correct it. But generally, with common sense, it should come fine. But these are some changes, like, it should be camel case like this. Okay, now the second thing is that something like this is not allowed. Something like this is not allowed. The listener, in case of click event, this thing which we can provide in button, that thing, it must be a function, it cannot be a string. So that in case of HTML, we saw that it was string. Here it cannot be a string, it has to be a function. Now if it is a function, it has to be in curly braces. Why? Because there is no other way, right? The quotes or single quote or double quote will mean string. We have to provide another value. Now this thing has to be a function. So this is basically a handler. Let's name it click handler, rather. Click handler. And click handler, and this click handler has to be a function. Okay, so let's define that function. So function click handler is what is let's simply print, let's say anything, clicked. Okay, and now you can see that, yeah, I get a button. Okay, that is fine. And then when I click this button, then clicked is printed, right? Apart from that, other things like, if you simply print what is passed here, so log e, then you'll see that some event is also passed, and that is some synthetic event. Actually, in React, a particular events are also called synthetic events. So this is a particular, like, they have their own version of JSX. I mean, like HTML, they have their own version, something called JSX. Similar, and rather than normal DOM, they use something called virtual DOM, which we might discuss later. Similarly, like normal events, they have something called their own version of synthetic event, which is again similar to like HTML DOM events, and they will behave like that only. But this is the way in which React handles events. Okay, but like HTML, you can also get this here, right? And then everything what we did earlier, like e dot prevent default, that sort of thing, so all those things will be available here also. Okay, which you can try it out as and when needed. Okay, now the thing is that, yeah, so this thing is working fine. You can see that you can click and get the results. But what is visible in the DOM? Let's see. You can see that button click me, just there is no on click, right? It has gone. Okay, why it has gone? Actually, when you so like other attributes, these attributes are generally handled in a different way by React, which means that they will do something like this button element dot add event listener click, and you understand. So the same click handler you can attach by binding listeners also, right? So rather than directly writing it here, they attach it to separately to a function. Why? Because you know that this thing is a full-fledged JavaScript function. Rather than defining it in this context, they might internally in their context they will define that function and attach that event listener. So that is how they implement it, right? So so this is how it is there, and it is not directly visible here but internally attached by React. So React takes care of that. Now we we can clearly see that this thing is written here. Okay. Now you might be thinking that why can't I write this here? In fact, you can, and turns out that you'll see that it will work still fine. However, there is a rule of thumb that if there is no dependency, like this thing is completely independent, right? This function has like nothing to do with this component, right? Just it is used, but there is no other dependency. So you can, if there is no such dependency, then you can just move it out, just for clarity also. And there is one more other reason which we might delve into it later, that later we'll see that with props and states, there is something called state which we'll let see. For those, this thing is continuously every time it is re-render. What is re-rendering, that we will see later. And then every time this will be called, then this function will be declared every time if it is declared, declared inside, right? That we might not want every time, if especially specifically in the case when this is completely independent, it has not it has no shared variable or something with this thing. Okay, so you understand, like if the requirement is that clicked and I want to show the URL. So for just for simplicity, I'm showing that this URL is used here also, and then just my requirement is that I have to write URL here also. Then I just can't move it outside because I have to put it here, so that as a result of closure, outside variable is available here, so I cannot move it outside. So in that case it is fine, in that case it is fine. Okay, but in other cases, if possible, try to move it outside. Okay, so so that should be fine. Now apart from the normal tags other we saw, we let's also try something called, so we have seen img tag. Let's see here, we have seen this img tag and button tag, right? Now actually, if the tag has no body, if any element for that matter has no body, so for example, let's say div is there, a particular div is there, and it has some body, let's say hello, right? Then obviously it will be visible here, right? Clearly. But if it has no body, then it will be like this, that is fine. But if it is having no body, then it can also be this exactly same thing can also be written as a self-closing tag. Understand? So self-closing tag means it has no body. Okay, and you can see that still it is rendered like this. So you might understand that again React will take care of everything. So if div tag is there, and let's say br tag is also similarly like this, right? Then br tag and div tag both are self closing, but React will automatically take care of that. Br tag is self close means that it does not need to be self closing, so it is rendered like this. But div is self close. Now in pure HTML, self closing div has no meaning, right? So I think that you are trying to mean that a div with no body, so it renders a div with no body, right? So that and all everything, this thing React will take care of. From our purposes in JSX, whether there is body or not, in both cases, if there is not if there is no body, then we have to self close it anyways, and those elements which have no body anyways, they have to be self closed, and in both cases we have to write like this, like slash and angle bracket. Okay, so this is from our point of view in JSX, it is pretty simple. Okay, next, let's try to understand that whatever we did till now, we did for normal HTML components, right? Actually, let's remove this, also not needed. In fact, this is also not needed, right? However, in fact, whatever we are doing for normal attributes of normal components, actually we can also pass attributes, such attributes to components also. Okay, so for example, let's say header is a component where welcome user is written, right? Now what if my requirement is that this component should be rendered, but welcome, instead of welcome user, I have to pass, I have to here specify the username, but that username is not known here, that username is known here where you are rendering that component. So somehow that information has to be passed from here to here, right? And that can be done by passing an attribute, something like, let's say, name. uh, Name is equal to, let's say, Alex, right? Now if you pass from here, then what you can do is that from here you can access that, you can access that like this, props dot, and the same thing, whatever was passed here, the name was named, right? Name, right? So the same thing, key name will be available here. And now you can see that instead of welcome user, it is welcome Alex. And whatever you do, say let's say multiple times you are doing, one time Alex, one time Bob, then whatever is the name, that name is used here correspondingly. Okay, so you can see welcome Alex and welcome Bob, so that is fine. Now this thing which we are passing is actually also called props, right? So whatever we are passing, you can see that it is available here in props, right? However, there is a slight difference between attributes and props. In fact, uh, we'll see that some people directly call this directly props, and you can also say that these are props, but you can also say that these are attributes. Actually, props is a superset. In fact, there is an attribute called children, which is not directly defined, but it will still be available in inside uh, the component, if there is any body. That will come to it later, but for now you can simply use the word you can use the word props and props and attributes interchangeably. Okay, so that should be fine for now. Now let's see that what is this props. So let's try to print this. So let's see props. Now if we print, then what is the expectation? It looks like name Alex is passed, then looks like if I'm trying to access his props name, then it looks like this should be an object, right? And turns out it is like that only. When it is printed, then you are able to see that name Alex, a key value pair is printed. And again, like any other attribute, like in any other normal HTML components, also HTML tags also we saw, we can pass multiple attributes or props from here, which means that you can also pass, let's say, what's your Twitter handle. The Twitter handle is let's say Alex99, whatever, and then you can use that here. So let's say welcome Alex, and then in, let's say, some bracket, you are using this variable props dot handle, and let's say we want to just put at symbol here just for clarity that it is a handle. Okay, so now you can see that something like this is visible, so that should be fine. However, so this just I wanted to show you that multiple props are also possible, but at the same time, as with normal HTML elements, here also you can also pass other types also. Okay, so right now let's see that instead of this, I am trying to pass, let's say, this object altogether directly. I'm trying to pass this object altogether directly, which means that I am doing something like this. I am doing something like this. Instead of this, I am saying that user is equal to, sorry, user is equal to this. Now you might be thinking that what is this double curly braces? So it's simple. You can see that this the inner curly brace is just like a creation of an object, right? And the outer curly braces is like anything, any JavaScript expression is passed, any or value is passed, then that can be passed only in curly braces, right? In fact, you can also do something like this: user is equal to hello, right? It can be a string also, but then if it is a string, then why to put it inside curly braces? You can directly put in user is equal to in quotes directly also hello, right? But this is also valid, and this is also exactly same as that. However, if it is curly braces, then in general it can be like anything. It can be true, false, 10, 20, any data type can be there. In a similar manner, object can also be there. It's in a similar manner, array can be also passed, right? This is also valid, right? In a similar manner, we are passing here an object inside, and that's why this two curly braces are coming. Okay, so that should be fairly clear now. So now, rather than passing two attributes or two props, I'm passing just one prop with the data as an object. Now what should be the difference? Now inside here, this props is should now be an object, right, with the first key user, and then inside that second level name and handle should be there, right? Which means that here it should be props dot user dot name, and here it should be props dot user dot handle, right? And as you can see that now it also works perfectly. But now when you print props, then you can see that inside props, user is a key, and that user value is again an object, something like this. And that is what is expected, right? Yeah, so that is fine. And again, you can do things like destructuring and destructuring on and also, for example, instead of this, I can directly destructure here only, let's say user. Okay, because I know that it has a user, right? So then I don't need to do this, right? So this is also fine, and it will work exactly in the same manner. But for simplicity, let's get back to props only, so that it is clear. Okay, so that should be fine. Now whatever we have done till now, let's try to do the same thing for class component also. So this is a functional component, right? There was a class component. Okay, now whatever we did here, let's try to do that same thing here. But before that, this is like a nested object sort of scenario, right? Before that, let's try to do the same thing with normal component, right? With normal two props. Okay, so let's see. In the app.js, let's also import header2, and then we are going to have header2, but right now we just want to separately pass, let's say, name, and right now let's pass only name. Okay, nothing else, not even handle. So now this thing has to be used inside header2. Header2 is a class based component, right? Now how to use that thing inside class based component? So if, let's say, this name is there, right, then using that here, obviously again curly braces you have to use, but here actually you cannot simply use props dot name, rather you have to use this dot props dot name. So that is the only difference. Apart from that, everything is same. So here in the functional component, the props are passed as an argument, so that variable is available as an argument, and then that variable dot user. And anyways, this you can use, this you can name anything, xyz also. If you name it xyz, then it will be xyz dot user, because this is just a parameter name, right? But that is not the case here. Here it has to be this dot props, because props is a special name which is available on the this variable inside a react component class. Okay, so this is fine. And if you try to render this, then you can see that welcome alex is available. And again, in a similar manner, you can pass a second component also. But let's directly go to this object example. Okay, so now if you see, then I have this dot, I should have this dot props definitely, but this dot props dot user I should have rather than this dot props dot name. So now my setup will be something like this, that I will have same thing. Let's copy from here. Let's copy from here. But instead of props.user.name, I should have this dot props.username. Here also I should have this dot props.user.handle, and let's remove this. Now you can see that both are exactly the same, which means that whatever we did in functional components, we are able to do exactly the same thing in class-based components also. Okay, so that should be fine. So I'll remove this for now for simplicity, because we have already done it for class-based components. Now let's take an example that there is some let's say thing which is expected. So user is expected here, right? But what if user is missing? Okay, so user is a nested thing, right? For simplicity, right now just make it a normal props.name. Okay, so just right now try to make it just normal this thing, right? And then just pass name is equal to alex. So what I'm trying to say is that my header component has a property dependency of alex, but what if alex is not passed here, like it is removed? What happens then? You can see that, yeah, as expected it is not visible, but you see that there is no error or something, right? Actually this is silently perfectly working fine. So what is happening is that when you don't pass anything, then what is props? So you can see, you can log to see that what is props. Turns out that it is empty object. It is empty object, which means that obviously it is empty object, which is because it is not passed, right? So that thing is not available. Name key pair value pair is not available. Then props dot name will be what? When it will be tried to accessed, it will be undefined. You can see that it is undefined, right? And essentially you are rendering undefined here. So this is actually what is happening eventually. And turns out that if you do something like that, then you are printing, you can see that you are printing just hello world. Sorry, it was after welcome, right? So let's go inside header p, and you can see that, and this is like this. Okay, so essentially what is happening is that welcome is printed, space is printed, like welcome space is one thing, and then exclamation mark is printed. This undefined thing is completely ignored at all. Completely ignored at all. In fact, for clarity, if you want to see, just remove this exclamation mark, then you will more clearly see that welcome space and nothing else is there after that. Welcome space, nothing there, which means that this whole thing is completely ignored, which means that it is working similar like null, which we discussed earlier. Like in JSX, if you put null, then it is not rendered. So like you can see that here also it is not rendered. So like null, undefined is also not rendered. Okay, that is one thing you have to remember. In fact, if you render false, then also it is not rendered. Okay, by this time you might be thinking that falsy values are not rendered, but that is not true. In fact, if you write true, then also it is not rendered. Okay, so like all boolean values, whether it is true or false, all are not rendered. You understand? If you want to print true, then you put it like a string or directly after like something like this, then definitely it will work out, right? But if pure value, which is a boolean, pure value, boolean can be true or false, right? And pure value, which is let's say undefined or null, all these things are not printed. However, things like 0 will be printed, as you can see that 0 is printed, and any other one more thing, this empty string is also not printed. Okay, so you can see clearly that here also it is complete. Not printed means not printed, not here, completely ignored in the rendering part itself. By React only it is completely ignored. In HTML itself, it is nothing is coming, right? So that is the thing. Again, if some non-empty string will be there, then definitely that will be available, so that is fine. Okay, so this is about what happens when some of the props are missing. Okay, second thing is that so for now let's convert it to props dot name, and let's pass something. So name is equal to Alex. So it works fine, it's working fine, right? Okay, now what I'm trying to say is that, let's say whatever name you are passing, that is fine, but eventually that is part of the props. What happens if I try to modify that prop? So let's say props dot name is there, and till now it was fine, but I want to modify. Let's say prop dot name is equal to Bob. Let's say I want to modify. Actually, you should never modify this. So this is one of the restrictions in React components, that whatever the props is passed, whether in class components or in functional components, in class components this dot props should never be modified in any fashion, and similarly functional components, normal props should never be modified in any fashion, neither directly, neither at nested level, never. Okay, so if you try to do this, then you can see that you get a warning, that not only warning, you get an error, proper error. In fact, your thing crashes, not even page is viewable, right? It is saying that cannot assign to read only property name of object. So essentially it is saying that this thing is read only, why are you trying to assign it? So you should never do something like this, and if you don't do that, then everything works fine. Okay, so that is one thing, that props are read only, and the same thing applies with class components also. Okay, now let's take an example of something called nested component. So this might be obvious, but I'll just give an example. We discussed that, yeah, normal like div, inside div we can have div, right? Similarly, inside header, actually we can have we are having this thing, right? But again inside here, again we can have another component, and which can again be imported here. Let me show you by an example. So let's say simply something like some horizontal rule tag is there, just as a line divider sort of thing, right? So that this sort of header feel is coming. Okay, but this thing is, let's say, a reusable thing, that this welcome thing is, let's say, this is simple greeting, and this is used at some other places also. Then we can create a component out of this also. So let's say we create a brand new component, and we call that let's say welcome.js, because that is what it is going to be, right? Now what we can do is that we can simply take this thing, right, and then we can move this as a component here. So inside welcome, which means that I will simply create a function called welcome, right, and inside that I will paste it, and again let's say that prop will be used here, and here that is fine. Now I have sorry, it will be like we have to return it, not directly like this. So return it, and we also have to export it. So export default welcome. Again, the props should have name, right? Otherwise it will not work. So when I use this in header, so in header I will use this by using welcome, and sometimes like automatically it will be imported if you put the name, so that is fine. So welcome component is imported and that is used here, but I have to pass what? I have to pass this thing name, right? And that's why what I have to do, I have to do something like name is equal to what value? How do I get name here? I get props dot name. So now you understand, right? Here the name, actually the name is available in props dot name. Again that value is taken and passed as name, and again this name, this can be like, let's say, user. Then here you have to use user, whatever name you can use. Okay, but ultimately you can see that things are working, which means that from here, instead of Alex, if you are changing to Bob, then it is changing, right? Which means that when I rendered name is equal to Bob, then header is rendered, but while rendering header, this welcome thing is rendered, and while welcome is rendered, then this p tag is rendered. Okay, now that user prop which is required inside welcome component, that is passed from the component which uses it. And again, when to use this nested component approach, generally, so right now I just give an example. Generally you will use it when this thing is reused, right? So let's say the same thing is used at some other place also, right? So I can split it in a separate component and use it. But I just wanted to show you that inside a normal component, again you can use another component, and you can use like mix and match normal component, like HTML component, HTML or user defined components in any fashion. Okay, so that is the idea. Now we have already seen that when we are printing props, so let's print props here. So we have already seen that, yeah, here in this case name was given, right? So Bob is the name which is being passed, that is fine. uh, however however what happens is that till now we were seeing that this these components, like normal HTML components, had some body, but whatever user components we were doing, they did not have body. All are self closed, isn't it? Can these user defined components also have body? Turns out they can, which means that you can have something like this also. So right now it is just empty, but you can also write anything here. So let's say I for example have some, let's say here let's say some p tag with, let's say, inside header, anything. Okay, now this thing turns out that it is a child of a component, right? Now uh, now how do you render it, right? So this um, if I simply print this, then you can see that this um, inside header thing is never visible anywhere, right? So how to do this, how to see this? Turns out that when you are inside this header, then the props which was earlier we saw that the prop was it was having only one prop key value pair, which was name Bob. However, now if you see, then it has also one more key value pair, which is children, and its value is some sort of object, actually, right? Turns out that object is actually this thing. And if you have multiple, so let's say like this, header 1 and header 2, then turns out that it will be an array. So it does not matter, but whatever is inside the body, that whatever are the children of this component, they are available as children variable, which means that these are available here inside header component as children, which means that props dot children. And now you can use this props dot children in any way which you want. So let's say I want to render here between this greeting and horizontal rule, right? So if I save, then I see that, yeah, inside header 1, inside header 2, let me see. So inside header 1 and inside header 2 is there because these are the two things available here. Okay, if I simply have this thing, then it is inside header 1, and it does not matter what you are having here, you can have anything. And this p tag is inside div, inside h2, right, inside h2. That's why these sort of things are happening. This all are like bold sort of thing, but otherwise you can understand that this is plain and simple. Just all this is basically all the whole children, one or more, available, and it will be not directly visible until unless you deal with them inside the component. Inside the component you will have props.children, and it is your wish how to use them. Okay, you can just use so let's say I pass let's say header 1, header 2, header 3, right? And then I know that I got all these three, right? But inside this I know that my props.children will be multiple, if you know them, right? Then you can take it like, let's say I just want to get the index 1, which means that I'll just be rendering inside header 2, not header 1 and 3. So that and all you can or if it is only 1, then you can test it out. But this props.children will have all the children. Now it is your responsibility how to handle them. Okay, so that should be fine. This is the point where I wanted to mention is that there is slight difference between props and attributes. It's like they are used interchangeably, but generally when we are passing any prop, then generally they are attributes. If apart from this, generally another attribute which is children, which is not actual attribute, but which is the body of the user defined component. However, it is available inside props. So that is the only slight difference. Otherwise everything is same. You can understand like this also, that yeah, everything is, all the props are passed here, that's it. But if there is any body, then that body is also available inside props. So you can understand it like that simply also. So that should be fine for now. For this video. In the next video we are going to start with some new topics, I think specifically about state management in React components.